German Shepherd was found in a cage full of rats. What baby did next changed his life forever. The story you're about to listen to will leave you speechless. What this little boy did for an abandoned dog will touch your heart in ways you never thought possible. Like, share, and comment where you're watching from to spread this incredible tale of courage and connection. The rain fell in sheets, turning the country dirt roads into rivers of mud. Melissa Hayes gripped the steering wheel of her old station wagon tighter as it splashed through another deep puddle. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of little Ethan, his face pressed against the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. At just 5 years old, he was the newest addition to her foster family, quiet, withdrawn, with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "We're almost there, buddy," Melissa called back. "Remember, we're just dropping off some supplies at the animal rescue place, then heading straight home before the storm gets worse." Ethan didn't answer. He rarely did. 6 months in her care, and she could count his spoken words on 2 hands. The social worker had warned her. Severe trauma, selective mutism, night terrors. What she hadn't mentioned was the way he sometimes stared at nothing, or how he flinched at the slightest raised voice. The GPS directed them down a rutted driveway toward a dilapidated farmhouse. Melissa frowned. This didn't look like any animal rescue she'd ever seen. The place was falling apart, peeling paint, broken windows patched with cardboard, trash scattered across the yard. But the address matched the emergency call she'd received that morning. Animal hoarding situation. Urgent supplies needed. "Stay in the car, okay?" she told Ethan as she pulled up. "I'll be quick." She grabbed the bags of dog food and blankets from the trunk and hurried through the rain to the porch. The door opened before she could knock, revealing an exhausted-looking woman in a volunteer vest. "Thank God you're here," she said, taking the supplies. "It's worse than we thought. 36 cats, 12 dogs, and—" She lowered her voice. "The owner's being taken for psychiatric evaluation. We've got a whole team inside, but we're overwhelmed." Lightning flashed, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the house. Melissa glanced back at the car and froze. The passenger door was open. Ethan was gone. "Ethan?" Panic surged through her as she spun around. "Ethan!" He couldn't have gone far. Not in this weather. Not with his fear of strangers. Melissa darted around the side of the house, calling his name, the rain soaking her to the skin within seconds. Relief washed over her when she spotted him, standing motionless in front of a small, decrepit shed about 50 yards from the main house. "Ethan, you scared me!" Melissa rushed toward him, ready to scold, but the words died in her throat when she saw his face. He was staring at the shed door with such intense focus that he didn't even seem to notice the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. When she reached him, he pointed at the door. Then, to her shock, he spoke. Something crying. Melissa fell silent, listening. At first, she heard nothing but the pounding rain on the metal roof. Then, there it was, a faint, pitiful whimper coming from inside the locked shed. "Hello?" Melissa called out. "Is anyone from the rescue team checking this shed?" No answer came from the main house. Everyone was too busy with the chaos inside. The whimpering came again, weaker this time. "Wait here," she told Ethan, but he clutched her hand with surprising strength. When she looked down, she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Determination. The padlock on the shed door was old and rusted. Melissa grabbed a rock from the ground and smashed it against the lock 3 times before it finally broke open. The door creaked ominously as she pushed it open, revealing a darkness so complete it seemed solid. The smell hit her first. Ammonia, feces, rot, and something worse. Death. She gagged, pulling her shirt over her nose, but Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward into the blackness. "Ethan, no!" Melissa fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a horror she wasn't prepared for. Cages, stacked from floor to ceiling. Most contained the skeletal remains of small animals, rabbits, guinea pigs, ferrets, long dead and decomposing. But in the corner, on the floor, sat a larger cage. Something moved inside it. Rats scurried across the floor, disappearing into holes in the walls as the light hit them. Melissa wanted to grab Ethan and run, to shield him from this nightmare, but he was already moving toward the cage in the corner, his small feet splashing through puddles of filth. The flashlight beam finally illuminated what was inside. A dog. A German Shepherd, once magnificent, now reduced to skin and bones. Its coat was matted with filth, eyes sunken, ribs protruding so sharply they looked ready to pierce through the skin. It lay on its side, chest barely moving with each shallow breath. Worst of all were the rats. They crawled over the dog's body as if it were already dead, biting, feeding. Yet the dog seemed too weak, too defeated to even flinch away from their teeth. "Oh my God," Melissa whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "We need to get help, now." But Ethan was already kneeling beside the cage, his small fingers reaching through the bars. Before Melissa could stop him, he touched the dog's nose, the only part of it not covered in filth or blood. The dog's eyes opened, deep amber, clouded with pain. They focused slowly on the boy. Melissa tensed, ready to pull Ethan back if the animal reacted aggressively. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The dog's tail, raw and bloody, thumped once against the floor of the cage. "Ethan, be careful," Melissa warned, her heart pounding. "That dog is very sick. It might bite." Ethan shook his head without looking up. "He won't bite," he said, his voice rusty from disuse. "He's not mean. He's just sad." While Melissa stood frozen in shock at hearing him speak full sentences, Ethan continued to stroke the dog's nose through the bars. The rats scattered as the boy's presence registered, disappearing into the shadows. "We need to get him out," Ethan said, turning those solemn eyes toward her. "Please." Before Melissa could respond, voices and flashlight beams cut through the rain outside. The rescue team had finally noticed their absence. "In here!" Melissa called out, waving her phone light. Two rescue workers appeared in the doorway, their expressions shifting from concern to horror as they took in the scene. "Jesus Christ," muttered one, a tall man with a beard. "We didn't know about this shed. The owner never mentioned it." The second worker, a woman with rubber gloves and a mask, stepped carefully inside. "Most of these animals are long dead. We'll need to document everything for the police." "This one's alive," Melissa said, pointing to the German Shepherd. "Barely." The woman approached, her flashlight beam making the dog flinch. "Poor thing's too far gone," she said after a quick assessment. "Look at those wounds, the infections alone, not to mention likely internal damage, parasites. This is a mercy case." "Mercy case?" Melissa asked, though she already knew what the term meant in rescue work. "Euthanasia," the man confirmed quietly. "It's suffering." "No!" The force of Ethan's shout made everyone jump. The boy planted himself in front of the cage, arms spread wide as if to shield the dog from the rescue workers. "You can't kill him! He wants to live! I can tell!" Melissa stared at her foster son in disbelief. In 6 months, she had never heard him raise his voice, had barely heard him speak at all. Now here he was, shouting, protecting this broken animal with a fierceness that transformed his small face. "Honey," the female rescue worker said gently, "I know it's sad, but this dog is suffering terribly. Sometimes the kindest thing we can—" "He's not suffering," Ethan's voice cracked. "He's just waiting. He's been waiting for someone to find him." Tears streamed down his face now, mingling with the rainwater and mud. His shoulders shook with sobs, but he didn't move from his protective stance. The rescue workers exchanged uncomfortable glances. The woman sighed and knelt to Ethan's level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked. Ethan sniffled, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Ethan," he whispered. "Well, Ethan, I can see you care about this dog very much, but he needs special medical care that—" "I'll take care of him," Ethan interrupted, his voice steadier now. "I'll clean him. I'll feed him. I'll make him better." The woman looked up at Melissa with a question in her eyes. Melissa felt torn. On one hand, she knew the workers were right. The dog was in terrible shape, possibly beyond saving. On the other hand, this was the most alive she'd seen Ethan since he'd come into her care. "Could we—" Melissa hesitated, hardly believing what she was about to suggest. "Could we at least try? Maybe take him to a vet first? See what they say?" The man shook his head. "Our resources are stretched to the breaking point with the animals in the house. We can't afford—" "I'll pay," Melissa said quickly. "Whatever it costs. Just, let's not make a decision here, like this." The female worker studied the boy and the dog for a long moment. Something passed between them, a recognition perhaps. Finally, she nodded. "We'll need to get him to the emergency vet right away, but I'm not making any promises." It took nearly 30 minutes to free the dog from the cage. The door was rusted shut, and they had to break the hinges. When they finally got it open, the dog didn't move, couldn't move. His legs were atrophied, possibly broken. The male worker carefully slid a blanket under him and lifted him out, grimacing at how little the animal weighed. "Hey, buddy, you're free now," he murmured to the dog, who responded with the faintest whimper. Ethan never left the dog's side, walking alongside as they carried him to their van. When they tried to close the doors with the dog inside, Ethan began to panic. "I need to stay with him," he cried, trying to climb in. "He'll be scared without me." Melissa had never seen such desperation on his face. After a quick discussion, the workers agreed to let Ethan ride with them to the emergency vet while Melissa followed in her car. The vet clinic was bright, sterile, and busy even at this late hour. The staff rushed the German Shepherd into the back, leaving Ethan and Melissa in the waiting room. Ethan paced anxiously, his muddy shoes leaving tracks on the linoleum floor. "He has to be okay," he kept saying, more to himself than to Melissa. "He has to be." After what felt like hours, a tired-looking veterinarian emerged. Her face was grave as she approached them. "The dog is in very bad shape," she began, her voice low. "Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple infected wounds. He has 2 broken ribs, a fractured hind leg that healed improperly, and his teeth show signs of having been filed down." "Filed down?" Melissa repeated, confused. The vet's expression darkened. "It's something done to fighting dogs sometimes, to make their bites less severe during training. But this dog shows no aggression markers at all. In fact, despite everything he's been through, his temperament is remarkably gentle." "Will he live?" Ethan asked directly, his eyes never leaving the vet's face. The woman hesitated. "We're doing everything we can, but I have to be honest. His chances aren't good. His body is shutting down. He's been through too much for too long." Ethan's lower lip trembled, but he didn't cry. Instead, he straightened his small shoulders. "Can I see him, please? He needs to know he's not alone anymore." Something in the boy's intensity made the vet pause. Then she nodded slowly. "Just for a few minutes. He's sedated, on IV fluids and antibiotics. Try not to touch any of the equipment." She led them through swinging doors into a treatment area. In the center of the room, on a metal table covered with warming blankets, lay the German Shepherd. Cleaned of filth, his condition looked even worse. Every rib visible, patches of fur missing to reveal raw skin beneath, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped steadily. Ethan approached slowly, stopping at the edge of the table. He didn't try to touch the dog, just stood there, looking. "He needs a name," he said suddenly. "Everyone needs a name." Melissa moved closer, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "What name do you think would fit him?" Ethan studied the dog thoughtfully. Despite the sedation, the animal's eyes fluttered open, focusing blearily on the boy. "Max," Ethan decided. "His name is Max." As if in response, the dog's tail moved weakly against the blanket. Once, twice. The vet raised her eyebrows in surprise. "He seems to like that name," she remarked. "Or maybe he just likes you." The rescue workers had lingered behind, discussing options in low voices with another staff member. Now they approached Melissa. "We need to make some decisions," the female worker said quietly. "If you're serious about taking responsibility for this dog—" "I am," Melissa said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Then there's paperwork. And you should know, his care won't be cheap. Even if he survives the night, he'll need weeks, maybe months of treatment." Melissa looked at Ethan, standing vigil beside the broken animal who had somehow broken through his walls of silence. She thought of the empty saving account she'd been building to renovate the spare bedroom, of the vacation she'd been planning for next summer, of all the sensible reasons to say no. Then she thought of Ethan's voice, clear and strong for the first time, saying, "He's not mean, he's just sad." "Where do I sign?" she asked. The next few hours passed in a blur of forms, signatures, and credit card authorizations. The rescue workers left, promising to check in tomorrow. The vet staff prepared to move Max to the intensive care ward for overnight monitoring. Through it all, Ethan refused to leave. "He needs to know we're coming back," he insisted. "He needs to know this isn't another trick." Finally, with Max settled in his kennel, hooked up to fluids and monitors, Melissa managed to coax Ethan toward the exit. It was nearly midnight. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean, the air smelling of wet pavement and possibility. At the door, Ethan stopped and turned back toward the treatment area, now hidden behind closed doors. "Wait for me, Max," he called out, his voice steady and sure. "I'll be back tomorrow, I promise." In the car heading home, Melissa's mind raced with practical concerns. Where would they put the dog if he survived? How would she afford his ongoing care? What would her other foster kids think? She glanced in the rearview mirror at Ethan, expecting to find him asleep after such an exhausting day. Instead, she found him wide awake, staring out of the window at the star-filled sky, a look of pure determination on his face. He caught her gaze in the mirror and did something she had never seen before. He smiled. "He's going to be okay," Ethan said with absolute conviction. "He just needs someone to love him, like me." Melissa felt her throat tighten. In that moment, looking at the newfound strength in this formerly silent child, she knew they had found something more important than just a dog today. They had found hope. The next morning arrived too slowly for Ethan. He was up before dawn, dressed and waiting by the front door when Melissa came downstairs in her bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. "The vet clinic doesn't open until 8, she reminded him gently. "But what if Max is scared?" Ethan asked, his face pinched with worry. "What if he thinks we left him forever?" Melissa knelt down to his level. "The doctors and nurses are taking good care of him, and we'll go see him the minute they open. I promise." The phone rang at 7:15 a.m. Melissa answered, her stomach dropping, when she heard the vet's voice on the other end. She turned away from Ethan, lowering her voice. "How is he?" "That's why I'm calling," the vet said. "He made it through the night, which honestly, I didn't expect. But there's something strange going on. He's refusing to eat or take oral medication. The techs have tried everything, special food, treats, even force feeding, which I hate to do." Melissa frowned. "So, what does that mean for his prognosis?" There was a pause on the line. "Normally, I'd say it's a bad sign. But here's the strange part. He keeps looking at the door. Every time someone enters the room, he tries to lift his head, then drops back down when he sees it's not, well, when he sees it's not your son." "Ethan isn't my son," Melissa corrected automatically. "He's my foster child." "Well, whoever he is to you, this dog seems to be waiting for him. I've never seen anything like it. Animals form attachments, of course, but this quickly, and in this condition." "We'll be there at 8, Melissa promised. When they arrived at the clinic, the staff led them straight back to the ICU. Max was in the same kennel as the night before, looking, if possible, even more fragile in the harsh morning light. His IV was still in place, his breathing shallow. But the moment Ethan stepped into the room, something changed. Max's ears twitched. His tail began to thump weakly against the kennel floor. And when Ethan knelt beside the cage, whispering, "I'm here, Max," just like I promised, the dog lifted his head and let out a soft whine. The vet watched in amazement as Ethan opened the kennel door and slipped his small hand inside, resting it gently on Max's paw. "Let's try something," she suggested, bringing over a bowl of soft, high-calorie food specially formulated for critical care. "Ethan, would you try feeding him?" Ethan nodded solemnly, taking the bowl. He scooped a tiny amount onto his fingertip and held it to Max's mouth. To everyone's astonishment, the dog licked it off, then looked expectantly for more. "Well, I'll be damned," muttered a vet tech who had been trying unsuccessfully to feed Max all morning. Bit by bit, Ethan fed the entire bowl to Max, talking softly to him the whole time. "You're being so good, Max. This food will help you get strong, and then you can come home with me. I have a bed all ready for you." Melissa raised an eyebrow at this last part. She certainly hadn't agreed to that yet, but she couldn't deny the miracle unfolding before her eyes. This dog that should have died during the night was now eating, responding, fighting to live, all because of a connection with a traumatized little boy who had barely spoken for months. "Can I come see him every day?" Ethan asked the vet earnestly. "He needs me." The vet looked at Melissa, who nodded. "I think that would be very good for Max," the vet agreed. "In fact, I think you might be the best medicine he could get." And so began a routine. Every day after school, Melissa would drive Ethan to the vet clinic, where he would spend hours sitting beside Max's kennel, reading to him, telling him stories, or just being present. The dog's improvement was slow but steady. After a week, he could sit up on his own. After 2, he managed a few shaky steps with support. His infections cleared, his wounds began to heal, and bit by bit, his eyes lost that vacant, hopeless look. But one question loomed larger with each passing day. What would happen when Max was well enough to leave the clinic? The answer came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after they had found him, the vet called Melissa for a serious conversation. "Max has made remarkable progress," she explained, as they watched Ethan brushing the dog's slowly improving coat through the observation window. "Physically, he's stable enough to be released into home care. He'll still need medications, special food, and regular checkups, but medically speaking, there's no reason to keep him here." Melissa took a deep breath. The moment of decision had arrived. "What about behaviorally? Is he safe? I have 2 other foster children at home." The vet considered this carefully. "Under normal circumstances, I'd recommend extensive behavioral assessment for a dog with his background before placing him in a home with children. But honestly, I've never seen anything like his bond with Ethan. He's gentle, responsive, almost protective, but not in an aggressive way." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Whatever this dog went through, it didn't break his spirit. That's rare, and it speaks to an exceptional temperament. "So you think we should take him?" Melissa asked. The vet smiled. "I think Ethan already has." That evening, Melissa sat Ethan down for a serious talk. She explained all the responsibilities that would come with bringing Max home, the medications, the training, the commitment. Ethan listened with uncharacteristic patience, nodding solemnly at each point. "I understand," he said when she finished. "I'll do everything. You won't have to help at all." Melissa smiled, ruffling his hair. "That's not how family works, buddy. If Max comes home with us, he'll be part of our family. We'll all help take care of him." Ethan's eyes widened. "You mean he can stay forever? Not just until he gets better?" The hope in his voice made Melissa's decision final. "Yes, if that's what you want, and if it works out with everyone." "It will," Ethan said with absolute certainty. "Max is meant to be with us. I can feel it." 2 days later, they brought Max home. He was still terribly thin, his coat patchy from healing wounds, but there was life in his amber eyes now. As they helped him from the car, he stood shakily on the driveway, his nose working overtime, taking in all the new scents. Melissa's other foster children, 10-year-old Zoe and her 7-year-old brother Lucas, watched cautiously from the porch. They'd been prepped about Max's condition and warned to be gentle, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of the damaged animal before them. "He looks scary," Lucas whispered, hiding behind his sister. "He's not scary," Ethan said defensively. "He's brave. He survived bad people who hurt him." Max's ears perked up at the tension in Ethan's voice. Slowly, painfully, he moved closer to the boy, pressing against his leg as if to reassure him. Zoe, always the peacemaker, stepped forward cautiously. "Can I pet him?" she asked. Ethan nodded, but added, "Slowly, and let him smell your hand first." To everyone's relief, Max accepted Zoe's tentative petting with a gentle wag of his tail. Even Lucas eventually crept forward for a careful pat. By the time they all went inside, some of the tension had eased. Melissa had prepared a comfortable bed in the corner of the living room, thinking Max would need space and quiet to recover. But the moment Ethan headed upstairs to his bedroom, Max tried to follow. His weak legs couldn't manage the stairs, and he whined in distress, attempting again and again until he collapsed from exhaustion. "I think he wants to stay with you," Melissa told Ethan. "Maybe we should move his bed upstairs tonight." Ethan shook his head. "No, I'll stay down here with him." And so began the first night. Melissa brought down blankets and pillows, setting up a makeshift bed for Ethan on the floor beside Max's new dog bed. She kissed them both goodnight and headed upstairs, hoping that exhaustion would lead to a peaceful night's sleep for everyone. Around 2 in the morning, she woke to the sound of whimpering. Concerned, she crept downstairs to check on them. What she saw stopped her at the bottom of the stairs. Max wasn't sleeping in his plush new bed. Instead, he lay on the bare floor beside Ethan's makeshift pallet. The boy had curled himself around the dog's damaged body, one thin arm draped protectively over Max's side. Both were deeply asleep, their breathing synchronized, faces inches apart. But what truly froze Melissa in place was the utter peace on Ethan's face. In 6 months of fostering him, through countless night terrors and panic attacks, she had never seen him sleep so soundly. She backed away silently, unwilling to disturb this miracle of connection. The first week with Max brought challenges. He was still on multiple medications, needed help getting outside to relieve himself, and startled at ordinary household noises like the blender or vacuum cleaner. But through it all, Ethan remained steadfast. He administered medicines without complaint, slept on the floor each night, and spoke to Max constantly in a gentle, reassuring voice. Most remarkably, Ethan's transformation extended beyond his care for Max. He began speaking more to Melissa and the other children. He joined them at the dinner table instead of eating alone. Once Melissa even heard him laugh at a joke Lucas told, a sound so unexpected it brought tears to her eyes. By the second week, Max had gained enough strength to navigate the house on his own. He followed Ethan everywhere, to the bathroom, to the table, to the backyard. If Ethan left his sight for even a moment, the dog would pace anxiously until he returned. "It's like he's afraid you'll disappear," Zoe observed one afternoon, as they watched Max frantically searching the house when Ethan had simply gone to get a glass of water. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "He's scared of being alone again, like I was." The casual mention of his own fear, something he'd never acknowledged before, made Melissa pause in her cooking. She turned to look at him, but he was already moving to reassure Max, kneeling to whisper in the dog's ear. Whatever he said seemed to calm the animal instantly. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in. Lightning flashed, and thunder shook the windows. Melissa braced herself for a difficult night. Both Ethan and Max had shown sensitivity to loud noises before. She was halfway down the stairs with extra blankets when she realized the house was completely quiet. In the living room, she found them in their usual position. Ethan curled around Max on the floor, but instead of trembling or hiding, they were both fast asleep. Max's tail thumped once against the floor as she approached, but his eyes remained closed, utterly at peace despite the storm raging outside. Melissa covered them both with a blanket and retreated upstairs, marveling at the change. Two broken souls, somehow healing each other. The next morning at breakfast, Ethan made an announcement. "Max doesn't sleep on the floor because his bed isn't good enough," he said, pushing his cereal around with his spoon. "He doesn't sleep because he has nightmares, just like I used to." The matter-of-fact way he said it, acknowledging both the dog's trauma and his own, left Melissa speechless. "How do you know?" Lucas asked, genuinely curious. Ethan shrugged. "I just do. I can feel what he feels sometimes. Like when he's scared, my heart beats fast too." Zoe rolled her eyes. "That's not possible. You can't feel what a dog feels." "Yes, I can," Ethan insisted, not angry, just certain. "Max tells me things." "Dogs can't talk," Lucas pointed out reasonably. "Not with words," Ethan agreed, "but I still understand him." Melissa was about to gently intervene when Ethan added something that sent a chill down her spine. "Last night, he told me about the men who hurt him, the ones who made him fight other dogs. He didn't want to fight, so they punished him. They put him in that cage and left him to die." The kitchen fell silent. Melissa exchanged a troubled glance with Zoe, who looked equally disturbed. The vet had suspected Max might have been used for dogfighting based on his injuries, but they'd never discussed this in front of Ethan. "Honey," Melissa began carefully, "did someone tell you about dogfighting? Did you hear the vet talking about it?" Ethan shook his head. "Max told me. He shows me pictures in my head sometimes, when we're both really quiet." Before Melissa could formulate a response to this unsettling statement, Max himself appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. His recovery was becoming more evident each day, his coat filling in, his frame less skeletal, his movements more fluid. He padded softly to Ethan's side and sat, looking expectantly at the boy. Without a word, Ethan reached for a piece of toast on his plate and offered half to Max. The dog took it gently from his fingers. "See," Ethan said, "he knew I was going to give him some. He feels what I feel too." Later that day, Melissa called the vet to schedule Max's checkup. After covering the medical details, she hesitantly brought up Ethan's claims. "Is it possible for a child and dog to have some kind of special connection, like a sixth sense or something?" The vet chuckled. "I'm a scientist, so officially I should say no. But after 20 years in practice, I've seen things I can't explain. Service dogs who alert to seizures before they happen. Therapy animals who go straight to the patient who needs them most in a crowded room. And Max and Ethan," she paused. "Let's just say I wouldn't dismiss it. It's just that Ethan's saying some disturbing things, details about Max's past that he shouldn't know." The vet was quiet for a moment. "Children are more intuitive than we give them credit for, and trauma creates bonds we don't fully understand. I wouldn't worry unless it's causing problems." As the weeks passed, Max's physical recovery continued to amaze everyone. His fur grew thick and glossy. His limping decreased. He gained weight, muscle definition returning to his once wasted frame. By all outward appearances, he was becoming a normal, healthy German shepherd. But other aspects of his behavior remained unusual. He refused to eat unless Ethan was present. He seemed to sense the boy's moods before they happened, moving to Ethan's side seconds before the child became upset, or bringing a toy, just as Ethan's expression began to darken with boredom. Most striking was the way Max positioned himself between Ethan and strangers, not aggressively, but watchfully, as if assessing potential threats. When the mail carrier approached the house, when visitors came to the door, when another dog walked by on the street, Max was instantly alert, placing his body between the newcomer and Ethan. "It's like having a furry bodyguard," Zoe remarked, after watching Max smoothly intercept a grocery delivery person who'd stepped too quickly toward Ethan. "He's not a bodyguard," Ethan corrected. "He's a protector. That's what he was trained to be before the bad people got him." Again, this specific knowledge that Ethan shouldn't have possessed made Melissa uneasy, but she couldn't deny the positive changes in her foster son. He was speaking freely now, sleeping through the night, even playing with the other children. For the first time since he'd arrived, he seemed like a normal 5-year-old boy. One evening, as Melissa was helping Ethan get ready for bed, she decided to gently probe further. "You and Max have become best friends," she observed, helping him with his pajama buttons. Ethan nodded, eyes serious. "He's more than my friend. He's part of me now." "What do you mean by that, sweetheart?" The boy thought for a moment, searching for words. "It's like, when he hurts, I hurt. When I'm sad, he knows right away. Sometimes I dream his dreams, and he dreams mine." Melissa kept her voice casual. "What kind of dreams does Max have?" "Sometimes good ones, about running in fields and playing with other dogs." Ethan's face darkened. "But sometimes bad ones, about men in dark clothes who made him bite things even when he didn't want to. About a little girl who used to love him before the bad men took him away." A chill ran down Melissa's spine. "Max belonged to someone else before? A family with a little girl?" Ethan nodded. "Her name was Lily. She had yellow hair. Max loved her, but then the bad men came and stole him from their yard. They wanted him because he was big and strong and smart." Melissa felt the hair on her arms stand up. She had told no one, not even the children, about the call she'd received from the vet 2 days earlier. The clinic had finally decoded the information on Max's microchip, revealing that he had indeed been registered to a family in a town about 100 miles away. A family who had reported him stolen from their fenced yard 3 years ago. A family with a daughter named Lillian. "Ethan," she said carefully, "did someone tell you that? About Max's old family?" The boy looked puzzled. "No. Max showed me. In here." He tapped his temple. "He remembers her yellow hair and the pink ball they used to play with, and how the bad men put a cloth on his nose that made him sleepy, then put him in a van." Melissa swallowed hard. None of this information had been in the microchip report, just the family's name and the date of theft. "Does Max want to go back to his old family?" she asked, dreading the answer. She had already grown attached to the dog herself, and the thought of separating him from Ethan seemed impossible. But Ethan shook his head firmly. "No. He says Lily is big now. She probably doesn't remember him. And besides," he lowered his voice to a whisper, leaning in close, "he has to stay with me. There's something important we have to do together." "What important thing?" Melissa asked, trying to keep her tone light despite the goosebumps spreading across her skin. Ethan's face became solemn, his eyes suddenly looking much older than his 5 years. "Max says the bad men aren't gone. They're still looking for him because he knows their secrets. He says they might come for him one day." "That's..." Melissa started to dismiss this as imagination, but Ethan continued. "It's okay, though. We'll be ready when they come. Max says I make him brave, and he makes me strong." That night, Melissa lay awake long after the children had gone to sleep, turning over Ethan's words in her mind. Part of her wanted to dismiss it all as the active imagination of a child who had found a way to process his own trauma through connection with an animal. But another part, the part that had seen the instant, inexplicable bond between boy and dog, the part that had witnessed both of their miraculous transformations, wondered if there was something more happening, something beyond her understanding. Just as she was finally drifting off to sleep, a sound jolted her fully awake, barking. Not the occasional woof she'd grown accustomed to, but urgent, alarm barking. Max never barked at night. Melissa threw off her covers and rushed downstairs. In the living room, Max stood at the front window, his posture rigid, fur raised along his spine. Ethan was already beside him, one hand buried in the ruff of the dog's neck. "What is it, boy?" Melissa asked, peering out into the darkness. The street appeared empty, lit only by a single street lamp at the corner. "I don't see anything." "There was a van," Ethan said, his voice unnaturally calm. "A white van. It drove by really slow, then stopped. A man was looking at our house." Melissa squinted into the night. "I don't see any van, honey. It's gone now, but Max saw it. He says it's starting." "What's starting?" Melissa asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Instead of answering, Ethan turned to look up at her, his small face grave in the shadows. "Max says we need to be careful now. The bad men know where he is." For the next few days, Melissa found herself watching the street more carefully, noting unfamiliar cars, listening for Max's warning barks. She even considered calling the police, but what would she say? That her foster son's dog had a premonition? That a white van might or might not have driven past their house? Instead, she focused on the practical, making sure doors and windows were locked at night, checking that the home security system was working properly, reminding the children not to talk to strangers. Normal precautions any parent might take, she told herself, refusing to acknowledge the cold knot of fear that had settled in her stomach since that night. Meanwhile, Max's physical recovery continued to impress everyone. At his 6-week checkup, the vet could barely contain her amazement. "If I hadn't treated him myself, I wouldn't believe this was the same dog," she admitted, examining Max's now glossy coat and clear eyes. "His muscle tone is returning. The limp is almost gone. It's remarkable." "It's because of Ethan," Melissa said, watching as the boy stroked Max's head, whispering encouragement during the examination. "They're inseparable." The vet lowered her voice. "There is one thing that concerns me, though." Melissa tensed. "What is it?" "His leg. The X-rays show an unusual foreign object embedded in the muscle tissue." She pulled up a digital image on her tablet, pointing to a small dark shape nestled against Max's femur. "At first, I thought it might be shrapnel or a bullet fragment, but the shape is too uniform." "What do you think it is?" Melissa asked, keeping her voice low so Ethan wouldn't overhear. The vet frowned. "I'm not sure. It's small, maybe half an inch long. It could be a broken piece of a microchip, but its location is wrong for that. Most concerning is that it seems to have been surgically implanted, not the result of an injury." "Surgically implanted?" Melissa repeated, bewildered. "Why would anyone do that?" "I don't know. It doesn't appear to be causing him pain or problems, so removing it would be an unnecessary risk at this point. But," the vet hesitated, "it's definitely unusual. Combined with the filed teeth, the specific pattern of scars, I'm starting to think Max might have been more than just a fighting dog." "What do you mean?" The vet glanced at Ethan, who was now demonstrating to Max how brave he should be for his shots. "I've seen similar modifications in working dogs, military, or specialized security. The particular training scars, the implant, it's not typical for ordinary abuse cases." Melissa felt a chill run through her as she recalled Ethan's words. He was a protector. That's what he was trained to be before the bad people got him. "Should I be worried?" she asked quietly. The vet considered this. "About Max? No. Whatever his background, he's clearly devoted to your family now, especially to Ethan. But," she lowered her voice further, "if someone went to the trouble of surgically altering this dog, they might have invested a lot in him. Just be vigilant." That evening, after the younger children were in bed, Melissa sat down with Zoe, her oldest foster child. At 10, Zoe had a maturity beyond her years, the result of growing up too fast in a difficult home before entering the foster system. "I need to ask you something important," Melissa began, keeping her tone casual. "Have you noticed anyone unusual hanging around the house or neighborhood lately? Anyone watching Ethan or Max?" Zoe's sharp eyes narrowed. "Is this about the white van Ethan saw?" Melissa nodded. "Partly. I just want to make sure we're all being observant." Zoe twisted a strand of her dark hair, thinking. "There was a man at the park yesterday. He was sitting on a bench while we were at the playground. I didn't think much of it, but—" "But what?" Melissa prompted gently. "He had a dog whistle. You know, the kind you can't hear. Max kept looking over at him, and his ears would twitch every few minutes like he was hearing something." Melissa felt her pulse quicken. "Did the man approach you or talk to you?" Zoe shook her head. "No. But when we were leaving, I saw him talking on his phone and looking at us, and Ethan got really quiet, like he sometimes does. He held onto Max's collar super tight all the way home. That night, Melissa checked on Ethan and Max twice before going to bed herself. They were in their usual position, the boy curled protectively around the dog on the living room floor, both sound asleep. The peaceful scene should have reassured her, but instead, she found herself studying Max with new eyes. The transformation from the broken animal they had found in that filthy cage was nothing short of miraculous. His once matted coat now gleamed with health, his frame filled out with lean muscle, his movements fluid and controlled. At moments like this, it was easy to imagine him as he might have been before, powerful, intelligent, trained for some specific purpose. But what purpose? And why would someone go to such lengths to harm a valuable animal? As if sensing her scrutiny, Max's eyes opened. He regarded her steadily in the dim light, making no move to disturb the sleeping child beside him. In that moment, Melissa had the uncanny sense that the dog was assessing her, measuring her worth, her trustworthiness, her capacity to protect what he had claimed as his own. Then his eyes closed again, dismissing her from his vigil. The next morning dawned rainy and cold. Melissa drove the children to school, watching the rearview mirror more carefully than usual for signs of the white van. Max sat in the back seat beside Ethan, his posture alert, eyes constantly scanning through the windows. It should have been comical, a dog playing bodyguard, but Melissa couldn't shake her unease. "Remember, Lucas is having that play date after school, and Zoe has soccer," she reminded Ethan as she pulled up to the drop-off line. "So it'll just be you and me at pickup time." Ethan nodded, gathering his backpack. He leaned over to give Max a hug, whispering something in the dog's ear before getting out of the car. Max whined softly as he watched the boy walk into the school building. "He'll be back in a few hours," Melissa assured the dog, reaching back to pat his head. "He's safe at school." Max gave her a look that seemed to say, "I know the school is safe," with such clarity that Melissa found herself responding aloud, "And we'll be safe at home too." She spent the morning catching up on paperwork for her job as a remote paralegal, with Max lying at her feet in the home office. Every hour or so, he would get up and make a circuit of the house, checking windows and doors before returning to his position. Around noon, Melissa heard him growl, a low, steady rumble unlike any sound she'd heard from him before. She looked up from her computer and to find him standing rigid at the office window, ears forward, hackles raised. "What is it, boy?" she asked, moving to look outside. The street appeared empty except for a utility van parked near the corner. Two men in coveralls were working on a telephone pole, their movements unhurried and professional. One glanced toward the house, then returned to his work. "It's just telephone repairman, Max," Melissa said, scratching behind his ears. "Nothing to worry about." But the dog remained tense, his eyes fixed on the workers. When one of them took out a phone and appeared to take a photo in their direction, Max's growl deepened. An hour later, when Melissa went to make lunch, she noticed the utility van was still there, though the workers were now on a different pole. Feeling slightly foolish but unable to ignore her instincts, she called the utility company. "We don't have any scheduled maintenance in your area today," the customer service representative informed her after checking the system. "Are you sure there are workers? What color are the coveralls?" "Blue," Melissa said, peering through the blinds. "With some kind of logo on the back, but I can't make it out from here." "Our field technicians wear gray," the representative said, "and they always drive clearly marked vehicles with our company logo." Melissa's mouth went dry. "Then who are these men?" "I'd suggest calling the police, ma'am. It could be a legitimate subcontractor, but it's better to be safe." By the time Melissa hung up and looked out again, the van and the workers were gone. She stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, wondering if she was overreacting. Then she felt something cold touch her hand. Max's nose, as he pushed himself against her leg, looking up with those intelligent amber eyes. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered. "You knew they weren't really repairmen." Max's tail gave a single thump against the floor. That afternoon, Melissa arrived at the school 20 minutes early for pickup, Max sitting alertly in the back seat. As they waited in the car line, she noticed a man standing across the street, partially hidden by a large oak tree. He was wearing sunglasses despite the overcast day, and something about his posture, too focused, made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. In the back seat, Max began to growl again, the sound vibrating through the car's interior. Melissa pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages while surreptitiously taking a photo of the man. As if sensing her attention, he turned and walked away, disappearing around a corner before she could get a clear shot. When Ethan finally emerged from the school, Melissa felt a rush of relief so intense it left her shaking. She leaned across to open the passenger door, calling out, "Hurry, honey, it's starting to rain again." The boy climbed in, immediately turning to greet Max. The dog licked his face once, then resumed his vigilant posture, eyes scanning the schoolyard and surrounding streets. "Did you have a good day?" Melissa asked, forcing cheerfulness into her voice as she pulled away from the curb. Ethan nodded absently, then said, "Max is upset. What happened?" Melissa glanced in the rearview mirror, surprised. The dog's expression hadn't changed, yet somehow Ethan had sensed his mood instantly. "Nothing serious," she said carefully. "There were some men working on the telephone poles near our house. Max didn't like them." Ethan's small hand reached back to stroke Max's head. "They weren't really telephone men," he said matter-of-factly. "They were looking for Max, taking pictures." Melissa nearly missed a stop sign, braking hard at the last second. "How do you know that, Ethan?" The boy shrugged. "Max told me. He recognized one of them. He used to bring the bad food at the fighting place." A chill ran down Melissa's spine. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to keep her voice steady. "Ethan, I need you to tell me everything Max has told you about these men. It's very important." For the next few minutes, as they drove home through the gathering dusk, Ethan spoke in a quiet, almost detached voice. He described a warehouse where dogs were kept in stacked cages, men who wore special gloves to avoid being bitten, training sessions where Max and other dogs were forced to attack targets while wearing heavy muzzles. But Max was different, Ethan explained. He was smarter than the other dogs. The boss man, the one with the white beard, he called Max the prototype, said he was worth a lot of money because of what was inside him. "Inside him?" Melissa echoed, thinking of the mysterious implant the vet had discovered. Ethan nodded solemnly. "In his leg. It's a special chip. Max doesn't know what it does, but the men talked about it all the time. They said it was classified and worth millions." Melissa's mind raced. Could this possibly be true? Or was it the elaborate fantasy of a traumatized child, projected onto an abused animal? As they turned onto their street, Max suddenly barked, a sharp warning sound. Up ahead, parked directly in front of their house, was a white van. Melissa's instinct was to keep driving, to call the police from a safe distance. But before she could react, the van's side door slid open and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket despite the warm spring day. "Drive past," Ethan said urgently. "Max says it's a trap." But it was too late. The man had spotted their car and was now walking toward the middle of the street, forcing Melissa to stop. He raised one hand in greeting, the other remaining suspiciously inside his jacket. "Just stay in the car," Melissa told Ethan, her voice tight with fear. "Lock the doors if I get out." In the back seat, Max was now on his feet, a continuous growl rumbling from deep in his chest. The sound was primal, threatening, nothing like the gentle dog they had come to know. The man approached her window, smiling pleasantly. He had a neatly trimmed beard and the weathered face of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly soft. "Excuse me, ma'am. I wonder if I could have a word. It's about your dog." Melissa cracked her window an inch. "Who are you?" The man's smile widened, not reaching his eyes. "My name is Carter. I represent an organization that lost a very valuable animal about 3 months ago. I believe you may have found him." In the back seat, Max's growl intensified. Ethan had one hand buried in the dog's fur, his face pale but determined. "I don't know what you're talking about," Melissa said firmly. "Please move so I can park in my driveway." Carter's expression hardened. "That dog isn't just a pet, ma'am. He's specialized equipment, property of the United States government. Harboring him is a federal offense." "He has a microchip," Melissa countered. "It's registered to a family in Oak Ridge who reported him stolen 3 years ago. If you have a legitimate claim, take it up with animal control." Something flashed in the man's eyes, surprise, quickly masked. "That information is incorrect. The animal was bred in our facility. He's never been a family pet." "He's lying," Ethan said suddenly, his voice carrying clearly through the car. "Max says he's never seen this man before. He's not from the same place as the others." Carter's gaze shifted to the back seat, his expression changing as he took in the boy and the dog. For an instant, Melissa saw something like fear cross his face. "Listen carefully," he said, his pleasant demeanor vanishing. "That animal is dangerous and unstable. It was part of a terminated program, scheduled for euthanasia before it escaped. Whatever you think you know. He was cut off by Max's sudden explosive barking. The dog lunged forward between the front seats, teeth bared inches from the partially open window. Carter stumbled back, his hand emerging from his jacket, holding something that glinted metallically in the fading light. Melissa slammed her foot on the accelerator, swerving around the man and screeching into her driveway. "Get inside now!" she shouted to Ethan as she threw the car into park. They ran for the front door, Max positioning himself between them and the street. Behind them, Carter was already back in the white van, which pulled away with a squeal of tires. Once inside, Melissa locked the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. "Are you okay?" she asked Ethan, who stood pale but composed beside Max. The boy nodded. "But he'll come back, with more men." "How do you know that?" "Max says they always have backup. That's how they work." Ethan knelt beside the dog, looking directly into his amber eyes. "He says we should run, tonight." Melissa took a deep breath, trying to think clearly through her fear. She needed more information before deciding what to do. "Ethan, I need you to tell me everything Max has told you. About the chip in his leg, about these men, about why they want him back so badly." The boy hesitated, glancing at the dog as if seeking permission. Max sat perfectly still, his intelligent eyes moving between the two humans. "It's okay," Ethan said finally, stroking Max's head. "We can trust her. She saved us both." Then, with a solemnity no 5-year-old should possess, Ethan began to speak. "Max wasn't always called Max. His real name is Echo. He was born in a special place where they train dogs to do secret things for the government. But he was different from the beginning, smarter. The scientist put something in his leg, a chip that can remember everything he sees and hears." Melissa frowned, skeptical despite her fear. "Like a recording device." Ethan shook his head. "More than that. It's connected to his brain somehow. They were trying to make dogs that could go places humans can't, see things humans shouldn't see, and remember everything perfectly. Max was the first one that worked right." The boy continued, speaking in that same detached voice, as if reciting something he'd memorized. "They sent him on missions with his handler, a man named Griffin. They worked together for 2 years. Max liked Griffin. He was kind, even though the work was dangerous." "What kind of missions?" Melissa asked softly. Ethan shrugged. "Max doesn't know the names of places, just that they were hot and dusty, and people spoke different languages. He and Griffin would follow bad men, listen to their talks, then report back." It sounded fantastic, like something from a spy thriller, not real life. Yet the fear in Melissa's gut felt very real. "Then something went wrong," Ethan continued. "On their last mission, Griffin discovered something he wasn't supposed to know. Something about people in the program doing bad things, selling secrets, hurting innocent people. He tried to report it, but the bad people found out." The boy's voice dropped to a whisper. "They killed Griffin. Max saw it happen. They shot him in the head while Max was right there, in their hotel room. Then they tried to take Max, but he escaped through a window. He ran and ran, for days." Melissa felt sick. She wanted to dismiss this as a child's vivid imagination, but Ethan's details were too specific, his manner too grave. "What happened then?" she asked. "Max was lost in a strange city. He was hungry and scared. A kind family found him, the ones with the little girl with yellow hair. They took him home, gave him a new name. For a while he was happy. He tried to forget the bad things. But the bad men found him?" Ethan nodded. "They tracked the chip in his leg. They stole him from the family's yard, took him to a new place. They tried to make him work for them, but he wouldn't cooperate. He kept trying to run away, so they punished him, tried to break him. When that didn't work, they put him in the fighting ring, hoping he would die." Max whined softly, pressing closer to Ethan's side. "When he still wouldn't die, they locked him in that cage with the rats, left him to starve." Ethan's small hand gently stroked the scar on Max's shoulder. "But then we found him, and now he's home." Melissa sat silent for a long moment, processing this incredible story. It seemed impossible, yet... Why did the man today say Max belonged to the government, if these people who took him are criminals? She finally asked. "Because they're hiding inside the government," Ethan explained, as if it were obvious, "using their jobs to do bad things. Max says there's proof of everything on the chip in his leg. That's why they want him back so badly. They can't let anyone find out what's on it." Melissa stood up, pacing the small living room. We need to call the police." "No." Ethan's vehemence startled her. "Max says we can't trust them. The bad men have friends everywhere. We have to find someone specific. Someone Griffin trusted." "Who?" "A man named Sullivan. He worked with Griffin. He lives in the city, about 2 hours from here. Max says he'll know what to do with the information." Melissa ran her hands through her hair, feeling overwhelmed. This was insanity. Trusting the supposed telepathic communications of a child and dog over common sense. And yet, the men watching the house were real. The fear in Carter's eyes when he had seen Max with Ethan had been real. "What about Lucas and Zoe?" she asked finally. "I can't just leave them." "Call your sister," Ethan suggested practically. "Tell her they need to stay with her tonight. Say Max is sick and we're going to the emergency vet." The simplicity of the solution, and the fact that it had come from a 5-year-old, nearly made Melissa laugh despite the tension. "And then what? We just drive to the city and look for this Sullivan person? We don't even know his first name or where exactly he lives." "Max knows," Ethan said confidently. "He can guide us, but we have to go soon, before they come back." As if to emphasize the point, Max stood up and walked to the front window, peering out through the curtains. His posture was alert but not alarmed, watchful, waiting. Melissa took a deep breath. Every instinct told her this was crazy, dangerous, potentially illegal. She should call the police, report the strange man, let the proper authorities sort it out. But then she looked at Ethan, this child who had been so broken, so silent when he came to her, now standing tall and determined beside the dog who had somehow healed him. And she knew she couldn't betray their trust. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll call my sister. Pack only what you absolutely need in your school backpack. We leave in 30 minutes." Darkness had fallen by the time they slipped out the back door. Melissa had called her sister with the emergency vet story, arranged for Lucas and Zoe to stay the night, and packed a small bag with essentials. Now she led Ethan and Max through the neighbor's yard, cutting across to the next street where she'd parked her car earlier, away from prying eyes. Rain fell in a gentle mist, shrouding their movement. Max padded silently beside Ethan, his head swiveling constantly, checking for threats. Despite the tension coiling in her stomach, Melissa couldn't help but marvel at the transformation in the dog's demeanor. Gone was any trace of the broken animal they had rescued. In his place moved a powerful, focused predator, every muscle primed for action, every sense alert. They reached the car without incident. Melissa helped Ethan into the back seat, then opened the door for Max. The dog surprised her by instead circling the vehicle, sniffing methodically around the wheels, underneath the chassis, and even leaping up to inspect the roof. "What's he doing?" Melissa whispered. "Checking for tracking devices," Ethan replied matter-of-factly. "The bad men use them." After a thorough inspection, Max gave a soft woof that apparently signaled the all clear, then jumped into the back seat beside Ethan. Melissa slid behind the wheel, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the key. The engine hummed to life, and they pulled away from the curb, headlights off until they reached the main road. "Which way?" she asked, pausing at the intersection. Ethan leaned forward, his face scrunched in concentration. After a moment, he pointed east toward the interstate. "That way first. Max says we need to switch cars. They might be looking for yours." Melissa wanted to question this. How exactly did they plan to switch cars? But the urgency of the situation kept her silent. She followed Ethan's directions, taking a series of turns that led them to a large shopping mall on the outskirts of town. The vast parking lot was still half full, with late-night moviegoers and restaurant patrons. "Park near the food court entrance," Ethan instructed. "By the blue pickup truck." Melissa did as he asked, increasingly bemused by the confident commands coming from her normally quiet foster son. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the rain pattering on the roof. "Now what?" Melissa finally asked. "We wait," Ethan said simply. "Max says the man will be here soon." "What man?" "Ethan, we can't just—" She was interrupted by a tap on her window. Melissa jumped, heart racing, then relaxed slightly when she saw it was an elderly man in a rain jacket, peering curiously at them. She cracked the window. "Are you Melissa?" the man asked in a gravelly voice. Stunned, she nodded. "I'm Frank," he said. "Got a call from my grandson Ricky. Said you need to borrow my car for a couple days. Something about an emergency." He held up a key fob. "This the right vehicle?" Melissa stared at him, completely confused. I don't know anyone named Ricky." The old man chuckled. "Course you don't, but your dog does. He bent down to peer into the back seat, directly at Max. "Don't you, boy? Been a long time." Max's tail thumped against the seat. He gave a soft whine of recognition. "You?" Melissa struggled to understand. "You know Max?" "Knew him as Echo, back when I worked security at the training facility, before I retired." Frank's weathered face grew serious. "Recognized him right away when Griffin started bringing him around. Special dog. Too smart for his own good, if you ask me." "Griffin?" Melissa echoed, remembering Ethan's story. "Max's handler?" Frank nodded. "Good man. Didn't deserve what happened to him." He glanced around the parking lot nervously. "Look, we shouldn't talk here. Take my truck. Your car's probably already flagged in their system. I'll park it somewhere safe, make it harder for them to track you." Melissa felt like she'd stumbled into some bizarre spy movie. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." Frank's gaze returned to Max. "Let's just say I owe Griffin and Echo a debt, and I don't much care for the fellows who've been looking for this dog. Now, hurry up before someone spots us together." 5 minutes later, they were heading east on the interstate in Frank's blue pickup truck, with Max wedged between Melissa and Ethan on the bench seat. Their few belongings had been transferred, and Frank had driven off in Melissa's car, promising to lead them on a wild goose chase. "How did Max contact that man?" Melissa asked Ethan as the city lights receded behind them. "You said he was Griffin's grandfather?" Ethan shook his head. "Not really his grandfather, just what Griffin called him. Max says Frank helped train him when he was a puppy. They have a special whistle call. The boy demonstrated a pattern of clicks with his tongue. Max can hear it from really far away. He sent the call when we were driving to the mall." "But how? Dogs can't whistle." Even as she said it, Melissa realized how ridiculous it sounded in the context of everything else that had happened. Ethan just shrugged. "Max says some things can't be explained with words. We just have to trust him." They drove through the night, stopping only for fuel and bathroom breaks. Max remained vigilant, growling softly whenever they passed a police car or when unknown vehicles followed them for too long. Ethan dozed against the dog's side, waking occasionally to relay new directions. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they approached the outskirts of the city. The early morning traffic was already building, streams of commuters heading into the downtown area. "Where exactly are we going?" Melissa asked, exhaustion making her voice rough. Ethan yawned and stretched. "An apartment building near the river. Sullivan lives on the top floor." "And you're sure he'll help us? What if he's working with the bad men now?" "Max says we can trust him. He and Griffin were like brothers." The directions led them to a renovated warehouse in what had once been an industrial district, but was now filled with trendy cafes and art galleries. Melissa parked the truck in a public garage 2 blocks away, another of Ethan's security precautions, and they approached the building on foot. There, Ethan pointed to a sleek 6-story structure with large windows and a rooftop garden visible from the street, top floor. They entered the lobby, which was minimalist and modern, polished concrete floors, exposed brick walls, and a small security desk manned by a bored-looking young woman. Max walked confidently beside Ethan, his nails clicking on the hard floor. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, eyeing their rumpled, travel-worn appearance with suspicion. "We're here to see James Sullivan," Melissa said, realizing too late that they had no appointment, no way to contact him, not even confirmation that he still lived here. The woman frowned. "Mr. Sullivan doesn't receive visitors without prior arrangement. If you'd like to leave your name—" Her words were cut off by Max's sudden bark, sharp, insistent. The dog moved to the elevator, pawing at the doors. "I'm sorry, but pets aren't allowed in the residential areas without proper registration," the receptionist began, standing up. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a tall man in his early 40s, dressed casually in jeans and a faded t-shirt. He had close-cropped dark hair flecked with gray, and the lean, coiled intensity of an athlete kept too long in a small space. His eyes widened as they fell on Max. "Echo?" he whispered, disbelief etched on his face. Max's entire body quivered. With a high-pitched whine, he launched himself forward, nearly knocking the man over in his enthusiasm. The stranger dropped to his knees, burying his hands in the dog's fur, his expression transforming from shock to joy to something like awe. "How is this possible?" he murmured. "They told me you were dead." "Mr. Sullivan?" Melissa ventured. The man looked up, seeming to notice her and Ethan for the first time. His eyes narrowed with sudden wariness. "Who are you? How did you find me? Max brought us, Ethan said simply. He says you're the only one who can help. Sullivan's gaze shifted to the boy, his expression unreadable. After a long moment, he stood, one hand remaining on Max's head. Come upstairs, he said quietly. Quickly. Sullivan's apartment occupied the entire top floor of the building, an open, airy space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. But Melissa barely noticed the impressive surroundings. She was too busy watching their host, who moved with the controlled precision of someone accustomed to danger. Sit, he instructed, gesturing to a large sectional sofa. And start from the beginning. How did you find Echo? And how did you know to come to me? Over the next half hour, Melissa and Ethan took turns explaining everything. Finding Max in the filthy shed, nursing him back to health, the strange bond he'd formed with Ethan, the men who had been watching them, and finally, the confrontation with Carter. Throughout the story, Sullivan's expression grew increasingly grim. Max stayed pressed against his leg, occasionally looking up at him with those intelligent amber eyes. And Max told you all this? Sullivan asked Ethan when they had finished. His tone wasn't condescending. If anything, he seemed genuinely curious. Ethan nodded. Not with words, but I can feel what he's thinking. See the pictures in his head sometimes. Sullivan studied the boy thoughtfully. That's unusual, even for Echo. What exactly is Echo? Melissa asked. What kind of dog is capable of all this? Sullivan sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. That's classified information, but considering you're both in danger because of him, you deserve to know. He moved to a sleek laptop on a nearby desk, typing rapidly. Echo was part of a program called Cerberus, a joint military intelligence initiative to create enhanced canine operatives. Not just trained dogs, but something more. They used genetic engineering, neural implants, specialized conditioning. Images appeared on the screen, sterile labs, men in white coats, kennels filled with shepherd puppies. Melissa felt sick looking at them. Most of the subjects couldn't handle the modifications. Their minds broke under the strain. But Echo was different. His neural integration was nearly perfect. He could process and retain information like no animal they'd ever seen. More importantly, he could form deep empathic bonds with his handlers. Sullivan turned to look at Max, his expression softening. Griffin was his primary handler. They worked together for 2 years, mostly intelligence gathering in conflict zones. The bond between them was extraordinary, almost telepathic, some said. Like me and Max, Ethan said quietly. Sullivan nodded. Exactly like that, which is what makes this so remarkable. That kind of connection was supposed to be limited to one handler, established through months of specialized training and chemical enhancement. But what happened? Melissa pressed. Why would people be hunting him now? Sullivan's face darkened. Their last mission went bad. Griffin uncovered evidence that certain elements within Cerberus were selling classified technology to hostile foreign actors. Before he could report it, he was killed. Echo disappeared the same night. The official story was that he'd been killed too, his body disposed of to protect program secrecy. But he escaped, Ethan said. Apparently so. Sullivan knelt beside Max, examining him with gentle hands. They have been looking for him ever since, I'd wager. The neural implant in his leg contains a complete record of everything he's witnessed, including, presumably, Griffin's murder and whatever evidence they were trying to suppress. His fingers found the slight bulge on Max's hind leg where the implant was located. If we can extract this data, we could expose the whole operation. Is that why that man Carter claimed Max was government property? Melissa asked. Sullivan's expression hardened. Carter works for a private military contractor that fronts for the corrupt faction within Cerberus. They've been trying to bury this for 3 years. So, what do we do now? Melissa asked, acutely aware of the danger they were in. Go to the police? The FBI? Sullivan shook his head. Too risky. We don't know how far this corruption extends. Our best bet is to extract the data ourselves, then take it directly to people I trust at the Inspector General's office. And how do we extract the data? Melissa asked. I know someone, a veterinarian who worked on the original program. She has the equipment to safely remove the implant and decrypt it. Sullivan checked his watch. Her clinic is about an hour from here. If we leave now... He was interrupted by the sharp, insistent buzz of the building's intercom. Sullivan frowned, moving to a panel near the door. Yes? Mr. Sullivan, came the receptionist's voice. "There are 2 men here from the Department of Defense. They're asking about a German Shepherd that was brought to the building earlier. They have badges." Sullivan's face went blank. "Tell them I'll be right down." He turned to Melissa and Ethan, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They've found us already. We need to leave. Now." "How?" Melissa asked, panic rising in her throat. "They'll be watching the elevators, the stairs." "Not all the stairs," Sullivan said grimly. He moved swiftly to what appeared to be a closet door, revealing instead a narrow staircase. "Service access. Leads to the parking garage. My car's there." They moved quickly, Sullivan leading the way, Max following, with Melissa and Ethan bringing up the rear. The stairwell was dimly lit and smelled of concrete dust and motor oil. "Stay close," Sullivan whispered, "and be ready to run if I say so." They descended 5 flights without incident, emerging into a cavernous underground parking garage. Sullivan directed them to a black SUV parked in a corner spot. He was just reaching for the door when Max suddenly growled, a deep, threatening sound that echoed in the enclosed space. "Down!" Sullivan shouted, shoving Melissa and Ethan behind a concrete pillar as the sharp crack of gunfire split the air. A bullet pinged off the SUV's hood, followed by another that shattered the driver's side window. Sullivan pulled a handgun from beneath his jacket, returning fire in the direction of the attack. "Stay down," he ordered, crouching beside them. "When I say go, run for that red sedan 3 cars over. The doors are unlocked. Get in the back and stay low." Melissa clutched Ethan to her chest, her heart hammering. The boy was trembling, but silent, his eyes wide with fear. Max stood in front of them, body rigid, teeth bared toward the unseen threat. More gunfire erupted, echoing deafeningly in the concrete structure. Sullivan fired twice more, then turned to them. "Now! Go!" Melissa grabbed Ethan's hand and ran, keeping low, zigzagging between parked cars. Behind them, Sullivan laid down covering fire. Max bounded alongside them, his powerful body a protective barrier on their exposed side. They reached the red sedan. Melissa yanked open the door, practically throwing Ethan into the back seat before diving in after him. Max leapt in last, his body covering the boys as more bullets peppered the surrounding vehicles. Sullivan appeared seconds later, sliding behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, and he slammed the car into reverse, tires squealing as they shot backward out of the parking space. "Stay down!" he shouted as the rear window exploded inward, showering them with glass fragments. Melissa covered Ethan with her body, feeling Max's warm weight pressing them both into the floor space between the seats. The car swerved violently, then accelerated forward. Through the shattered window, she caught glimpses of the parking garage spinning around them as Sullivan executed a tight turn. Then the flash of daylight as they burst out onto the street. Horns blared as they cut across traffic. Sullivan drove with terrifying skill, weaving between cars, taking turns at speeds that lifted the vehicle onto 2 wheels. After several minutes of this heart-stopping evasion, he finally slowed, checking the rearview mirror constantly. "I think we lost them," he said, his voice tight. "For now." Melissa cautiously sat up, pulling Ethan with her. The boy appeared shaken but uninjured. Max raised his head, sniffing the air, then gave a soft woof that seemed to signal the all clear. "Is everyone okay?" Sullivan asked, glancing back at them. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, where flying glass had struck him. "We're fine," Melissa managed, her voice trembling. Who was that?" "Carter's men," Sullivan said grimly. "They must have been tracking us somehow." Ethan spoke up, his voice small but steady. "They're tracking Max, the chip in his leg. It has a GPS signal. The bad men can follow it." Sullivan frowned. That would explain how they found us so quickly. He made a sudden decision, turning the car onto a side street. "Change of plans. We need to remove that implant now, before they can regroup." "But your veterinarian friend," Melissa began. "No time to reach her. We'll have to do it ourselves." Sullivan's expression was grim but determined. "I know a place." 20 minutes of tense driving brought them to an industrial area on the city's south side. Sullivan pulled into the delivery entrance of a large, seemingly abandoned warehouse. He punched a code into a keypad, and a loading bay door rattled upward. "Griffin and I maintain this safe house," he explained as they drove inside. "Off the books. Only a few people know about it." The interior was cavernous and mostly empty, save for a small living space set up in one corner, cots, a basic kitchen area, and what appeared to be medical supplies. You knew they'd come after you someday? Melissa asked, taking in the preparations. Sullivan's expression was bleak. I knew when Griffin was killed that I was probably next on their list. I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop for 3 years. He parked the car and helped them out, locking the warehouse door behind them. Max stuck close to Ethan, occasionally glancing at Sullivan as if awaiting instructions. I have basic surgical equipment, Sullivan said, leading them to the makeshift living area. I'm not a vet, but I've been trained in field medicine. If the implant is where I think it is, I should be able to remove it safely. You want to perform surgery? Here? Melissa was aghast. That's too dangerous. No more dangerous than waiting for Carter's team to find us again, Sullivan countered. Every minute we delay gives them time to close in. It's okay, Ethan said suddenly. They both turned to look at him. The boy was kneeling beside Max, one hand resting on the dog's head. Max says it's the right thing to do. He trusts Sullivan. Melissa felt torn between protecting the child and dog she'd come to love, and acknowledging the deadly reality of their situation. Finally, she nodded. What do you need me to do? Help me set up, Sullivan said, already moving toward a cabinet of supplies, and keep Ethan occupied while I work. He shouldn't have to watch this. But Ethan shook his head firmly. I'm staying with Max. He'll be scared without me. Sullivan studied the boy for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but you'll need to be very brave and very still. Can you do that? Yes, Ethan said without hesitation. I can be brave for Max. Over the next hour, Sullivan transformed the sparse space into a makeshift operating room. He laid out surgical instruments, prepared antiseptic solutions, and rigged up a bright work light. With Melissa's help, he created a clean field on one of the cots, using sterile sheets from sealed packages. The implant is here, he explained, gently probing Max's left hind leg. I'll need to make an incision about 2 inches long, then extract the device without damaging the surrounding tissue. The trickiest part will be avoiding the major blood vessels. Will it hurt him? Ethan asked, his face pale but composed. I have sedatives and local anesthesia, Sullivan assured him. He'll sleep through the whole thing. When everything was ready, Sullivan prepared a syringe with a carefully measured dose of sedative. Max lay calmly on the makeshift operating table, his intelligent eyes moving between Sullivan and Ethan. It's okay, boy, Sullivan murmured, kneeling to administer the injection. Just like old times, right? You and me, saving the world. Max's tail gave a single thump against the table. As the sedative took effect, his eyes began to droop. His last conscious action was to turn his head toward Ethan, giving the boy's hand a gentle lick before surrendering to the drug's effects. He's out, Sullivan said, checking Max's reflexes. Now for the local anesthetic, then we begin. Melissa tried to distract Ethan as Sullivan made the first incision, but the boy refused to look away. He watched with solemn intensity as Sullivan worked, his small face set with a determination far beyond his years. There it is, Sullivan said after several tense minutes of careful dissection. Right where I expected. With delicate precision, he extracted a small metallic object from the muscle tissue of Max's leg, a cylinder about the size of a vitamin capsule, but with tiny filaments extending from one end. The neural interface, Sullivan explained, carefully placing the device in a small metal container. Those filaments connected directly to his nervous system, recording everything he experienced. Will he be different without it? Ethan asked anxiously. Sullivan shook his head. His enhanced abilities were genetic, not electronic. The implant just recorded data. It didn't change who he is. He began suturing the wound closed with practiced efficiency. The real question is whether removing it will stop them from tracking him. As if to answer that question, Max's eyes suddenly snapped open, despite the sedative. His ears twitched, and he let out a low, warning growl. He shouldn't be conscious yet, Sullivan said, frowning, but even as he spoke, the distant sound of vehicles approaching reached their ears. They found us, Ethan whispered, his face draining of color. Max says there are lots of them this time. Sullivan's jaw tightened. He worked faster, completing the last few stitches. The implant must have had a backup transmitter, he muttered. They could track it right up until the moment I removed it. The sound of engines grew louder, accompanied by the screech of brakes outside the warehouse. Car doors slammed, followed by the ominous sound of multiple footsteps. Can Max walk? Melissa asked urgently. Sullivan helped the still groggy dog to his feet. Max swayed slightly but managed to stand, shaking his head to clear the lingering effects of the sedative. "There's a maintenance tunnel," Sullivan said, grabbing the metal container with the implant. "Leads to the storm drain system. We can—" His words were cut off by the thunderous crash of the loading bay door being torn open. Bright lights flooded the warehouse as armed men poured through the entrance. "James Sullivan!" Carter's voice boomed across the space. "Step away from the animal and surrender the stolen property!" Sullivan drew his weapon, motioning for Melissa and Ethan to get behind a stack of crates. "Take the boy and run for the tunnel," he commanded. "I'll hold them off." But Ethan shook his head, kneeling beside Max. "We don't run anymore," he said with quiet determination. "Max says it's time to fight back." As if responding to some unspoken signal, Max's demeanor transformed completely. Gone was any trace of the gentle family pet. In his place stood a weapon of war, muscles coiled, teeth bared, eyes blazing with deadly intelligence. "Echo!" Carter's voice carried across the warehouse, tinged now with fear rather than authority. "You remember me, don't you? I was there when we put you down the first time." Max's growl deepened, becoming something primal and terrifying. He began stalking toward the intruders, each step deliberate and predatory. "He's going to get himself killed," Melissa breathed, starting forward. But Ethan caught her arm. "No," he said softly. "Watch." What happened next defied everything Melissa thought she knew about dogs, or any animal. Max moved with superhuman intelligence, using the warehouse's layout like a chess master positioning pieces. He knocked over a stack of metal drums, creating a barrier that forced Carter's men to split up. Then he circled behind them, using shadows and blind spots with tactical precision. The first man went down when Max burst from behind a crate, hitting him with such force that his weapon went flying. The impact sent the attacker crashing into a support beam, where he crumpled, unconscious. "Take him down!" Carter screamed. Gunfire erupted, echoing deafeningly in the confined space. But Max seemed to anticipate every shot, moving like liquid shadow between cover points. He struck again and again, never killing, but each attack precisely calculated to disable without permanent harm. "It's like he's fighting multiple opponents at once," Sullivan said in amazement, lowering his weapon. "But he's tracking all their movements simultaneously." Ethan stood transfixed, his eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "He's not just fighting them," he whispered. "He's showing them something, teaching them something." As the chaos continued, Melissa began to understand what the boy meant. Max wasn't simply attacking. He was demonstrating his capabilities, proving his intelligence, making it clear that he was no ordinary animal. One by one, Carter's men found themselves outmaneuvered, disarmed, or temporarily incapacitated. Those still standing began to back toward the entrance, their confident aggression replaced by fear. Only Carter remained, standing alone in the center of the warehouse with a pistol in his shaking hands. "You're just an animal!" he shouted at Max, desperation making his voice crack. "A tool! Property!" Max padded slowly toward him, his amber eyes locked on Carter's face. There was no rage in his expression now, only a profound, almost human intelligence. Carter raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger, but before he could fire, Ethan stepped out from behind the crates. "Don't," the boy said simply. Carter spun toward him, gun swinging in Ethan's direction. "Stay back, kid. This doesn't concern you." Max's response was instantaneous. He launched himself through the air, covering 20 feet in a single bound. Carter got off one wild shot before the dog's impact sent him sprawling. The gun skittered across the concrete floor, but instead of attacking the fallen man, Max simply stood over him, one massive paw planted on Carter's chest. His weight was enough to pin the man without causing injury. "Please," Carter gasped, staring up into those intelligent amber eyes. "I was just following orders." Max tilted his head, studying the man beneath him. Then, incredibly, he stepped back, releasing his captive. Carter scrambled to his feet, backing toward the exit. "This isn't over," he snarled, though the threat sounded hollow. "You can't hide forever." "We're not hiding anymore," Ethan said calmly. He walked over to Sullivan, who was still holding the metal container with the implant. "Show him what's on it." Sullivan looked puzzled, but opened his laptop, connecting the extracted device to a specialized reader. The screen filled with data, files, recordings, video footage. 3 years of classified information, Sullivan said, his voice carrying clearly across the warehouse. including recordings of your boss ordering Griffin's assassination, and financial records showing payments to foreign intelligence services. Carter's face went pale. You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. No, Ethan interrupted, his young voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible. You don't understand. Max isn't your property. He never was. He chose to help because he believed in protecting people, but you turned that into something evil. The boy walked over to Max, placing his small hand on the dog's head. He's not going to run anymore, and neither am I. We're going to make sure everyone knows the truth. For the first time since they had found him in that filthy cage, Max sat, his posture relaxed but alert. He looked directly at Carter, then deliberately turned his back on the man, a gesture of dismissal that was somehow more devastating than any physical attack could have been. Carter and his remaining men retreated, their footsteps echoing, until the sound of vehicles driving away confirmed their departure. In the sudden silence that followed, Melissa found herself shaking. "Is it over?" she asked. Sullivan was studying the data from the implant, his expression growing more amazed by the minute. "This is incredible," he murmured. "Not just evidence of the corruption, there are detailed records of other operations, financial connections, names and dates going back years. This could bring down the entire network." "What happens now?" Melissa asked. "Now we take this to people I trust in Washington," Sullivan said, carefully transferring the data to a secure drive. "People who have been trying to expose this corruption for years but lacked the proof." Ethan yawned, suddenly looking like the 5-year-old he was. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Can we go home now?" he asked plaintively. Melissa knelt beside him, gathering him into her arms. "Yes, sweetheart, we can go home." But as they prepared to leave the warehouse, Max made no move to follow. Instead, he sat perfectly still, staring toward the exit where Carter had disappeared. "Max?" Ethan called softly. "Come on, boy." The dog turned to look at them, his amber eyes filled with an emotion Melissa could only describe as profound sadness. He walked over to Ethan and sat before the boy, pressing his massive head against the small chest. "What is it?" Ethan asked, stroking Max's ears. "What's wrong?" For a long moment, they communicated in that wordless way that had become so familiar. Gradually, tears began to stream down Ethan's face. "He says he can't come with us," the boy whispered. "The fighting, using his training like that. It hurt something inside him, something important." "What do you mean?" Melissa asked, though she was beginning to understand. "The connection between us," Ethan explained, his voice breaking. "It was built on trust and love and healing, but when he became a weapon again, even for good reasons, it changed something." Max whined softly, nuzzling against Ethan's cheek. The gesture was gentle, loving, but also unmistakably final. "He says he needs time to remember who he really is," Ethan continued through his tears. "Away from fighting, away from being special. He needs to be just a dog for a while." Sullivan knelt beside them, his hand gentle on Max's head. "There's a sanctuary," he said quietly. "A place where retired military animals go to recover. Good people, lots of space to run, other dogs to play with. He'd be safe there." "But he'd be alone," Ethan protested. "He'd be sad without us." Max lifted his head, looking directly into the boy's eyes. After a moment, Ethan nodded slowly. "He says he won't be alone. He'll carry us with him, in his heart. And someday, when he's ready, he'll find us again." The goodbyes were heartbreaking. Max allowed each of them to pet him, to whisper words of love and gratitude. But when Ethan tried to climb into the car with him for the drive to the sanctuary, the dog gently but firmly refused, nudging the boy back toward Melissa. "I love you, Max," Ethan whispered, his small arms wrapped around the powerful neck. "Thank you for saving me." Max's tail thumped once against the ground. Then he walked to Sullivan's car and waited patiently for the door to open. 6 months later, Melissa was making breakfast when Ethan came running into the kitchen, his face glowing with excitement. "He's coming back!" the boy announced breathlessly. "Max is coming back!" Melissa paused in flipping pancakes. "How do you know?" "I dreamed about him last night. Really dreamed, not just remembered. He's different now, peaceful, happy. He says he's ready to be part of a family again." That afternoon, as they played in the backyard with Lucas and Zoe, a familiar figure appeared at the gate. But this wasn't the broken animal they'd rescued or the deadly weapon he'd become. This was simply a magnificent German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes and a gently wagging tail. Max, whole, healed, and home at last. "I knew you'd come back," Ethan said, running to embrace him. "I never stopped believing." The dog's response was to knock the boy gently to the ground and shower his face with kisses, his tail wagging so hard his entire body wiggled with joy. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, all together for the first time, Melissa watched Ethan chattering happily to Max about all the things they'd do together. The connection between them was still there, but it was different now, less desperate, more joyful, built on choice rather than need. Sullivan had been right about the evidence on the implant. The corruption scandal had made national headlines, leading to multiple arrests and the complete restructuring of several intelligence programs. The story of Echo, the military dog whose courage had exposed it all, had captured the public imagination. But here, in this kitchen, he was simply Max, beloved family member, gentle protector, and living proof that even the deepest wounds could heal with enough love and time. Later that night, as Ethan and Max settled into their old spot on the living room floor, Melissa tucked a blanket around them both. "Sweet dreams," she whispered. Max's tail thumped once against the floor, a sound that had become synonymous with safety, with love, with home. Outside, the wind carried the promise of new adventures, new chances to be heroes, but for now, they were content to be exactly what they had always been meant to be, a boy and his dog, healing each other one day at a time. And somewhere in the depths of sleep, their dreams intertwined, not with visions of danger or sorrow, but with endless fields to run through, games to play, and the simple, perfect joy of being together. The story you just listened to proves that love can conquer even the darkest circumstances. If this incredible journey touched your heart, share it with others who need to believe in second chances. Comment below where you're watching from, and let us know about the animals that have changed your life. Remember to subscribe for more amazing stories that celebrate the unbreakable bonds between humans and their four-legged heroes. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't between people. They're between a broken child and a broken dog who save each other simply by refusing to give up. Max and Ethan's story reminds us that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, and that the most unlikely friendships often become the strongest bonds of all. Their tale will live on as proof that in a world that can sometimes seem cruel and dark, there are still miracles waiting to happen. All we have to do is open our hearts and let love find its way in.